Welcome in to the Locked On Knicks podcast. We are once again joined by Prez of the Strickland to continue our 2024 draft coverage. He's going to tell you why Tyler Smith might be the steal of the 2024 NBA draft. And if you're into the idea of the Knicks getting a stretch five, spoilers, I am. This might be the episode for you. You'll find out why in just a sec on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, your favorite daily New York Knicks podcast. And if you want to become an everydayer, you know the drill. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode. And if you do so, the Knicks will draft your favorite prospect. Ignore the fact that some of you might have different favorite prospects, therefore it's impossible. And be sure to hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast platform of choice so you always have us with you on the go to get some drafty goodness straight out the oven from our guy Prez. But before we get into that, I wanted to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We're going to get into Tyler Smith. We're going to get into some stretch fives. But before we do that, the number one prospect in the country, could he actually fall to the New York Knicks? We talk about it now on Locked On Knicks. I guess sticking with the guard theme, I mean, it intrigues me that you're really high on Isaiah Collier, because I think we've seen a lot of times in recent year where a guy who was the number one recruit in the country has sort of an up and down freshman year and doesn't make the leap, and maybe the areas they were weakest coming out of high school or didn't totally translate to the college game. And then it feels like those guys drop and oftentimes almost get disproportionately punished. I think of Nick Smith last year. I think of Brandon Boston, who obviously had to totally break through with the Clippers, but I don't know. I always see him putting up good box score numbers whenever he gets into games. And I'm wondering if he's another guy in that type of mold. And then I just read descriptions of him and it kind of screams all right, is this Emmanuel Mudiay 2.0? And do I really want that experience in my life? But that's sort of the other spot where if the Knicks aren't going to bring Rokas over, and maybe that's something to talk about before we wrap up this show. I still think there is a need for a true blue, backup point guard, or at the very least, shot creator. And obviously having Randall back is going to solve a good portion of that issue. And the fact that Deuce did seem to make a substantial leap in his handle, is also a boon. But there were times in the playoffs and there were times in the regular season where Brunson wasn't on the court post the Quickly trade, and it was just a disaster. And anyone who could just keep the trains running on time would sort of be a plus. And I know Isaiah, obviously in the best case scenario, gives you a lot more than that even.
Yeah, he does, but does he though? And I mean that for all rookie point guards, right? Who's the last rookie point guard who you were oh man, they're just holding it down. They're just solid. It's rare, man. It's number one pick type guys. And even then, we said with Scoot, it's taken him some time, right? So it's pretty tough for a point guard to keep the ship stable as a rookie, which is why I think if they did that, it would definitely be a true home run swing. And, it would be an incredible indication of faith in a player like that. And it's not to say that they won't do that, but it would just be a departure from how this franchise usually operates. But maybe he's talented enough to some players. I mean, to some people in the front office, to be worth that kind of gamble, right? Presumably some team in the teens or the 20s is going to do that exact thing with Isaiah Collier. So he'll have a chance to be someone's backup point guard probably, or at worst third point guard. So he's really talented. If I'm a team that's risk averse though, or has one pick, there's something to be said for I'm going to draft this guy who dogged it on defense, who doesn't play above the rim, who's 6'4", which is not short, but he has a 6'4" wingspan, which is short. And maybe he can shoot, maybe he can't, right? That is far from a lock it and pop it kind of sales pitch. Obviously the other side of the coin is this guy was supposed to be arguably the number one pick. What he lacks for in hops, he makes up for in being jacked and really fast downhill with the ball. When he came back from injury, the last 11 games of the college season, shot 38% from three. He shot fine. More like what we thought. If you look at his high school stuff, he was passing even more and much better than he did in college. And it's not like he was a bad passer in college at all. So he's super duper gifted. And I'm still really high on him just because USC was kind of a shit show. There was a lot going on there. It was just really weird offense and spacing and all types of stuff. And he still demonstrated a lot of the things that I like to see from my future ball handling prospects, like just drawing a zillion fouls and just like generally being able to get wherever he wants to go, being a decent shooter. I don't know about the defense. You're gonna have to figure that one out. I got no excuse for that one, but he's firmly in my top 12. So that'd be really cool if we got him. I mean, like you said, it's not like there's a ton of great options, right? Rokas, I love him, but he's never played in the NBA. So if he was so amazing, like, should he have been playing more over these washed up vets? Probably, right? Even though like it's easy for me to sit here and say like, oh, they were just doing like how Tibbs used to do and just playing a bunch of old bums over young good players, which is 100% what is happening over there. But like when it comes down to it, if you're a front office, like your job isn't to make excuses for guys, right? It's to look for proof that they can help you right now. So maybe you do both and bring them both over, right? Rokas can play the two as well. He did it a lot in Spain. So, there's a lot of ways they could go about it. But like free agent backup point guards, you're talking about a bunch of like not many appealing options here, right? So you're right. It is kind of slim pickings for that backup spot. Could be that they just say like, look, Deuce was driving in the playoffs. We know it didn't work last year for our backup units, but we're going to give it a go. And if it's bad, maybe we'll just trade for somebody in the season, right? Like, so there's a lot of ways they could do it. I don't think it necessarily has to be by the draft.
I think we're obviously, we're talking about backup point guard. We're leaving out the obvious option of the resurgent Alec Burks as well, who is clearly.
Thought you were going to say throw an offer sheet at Emmanuel quickly.
I mean, yeah, that would be hilarious, but I don't think they can, short of dismantling the entire team in pursuit of that. I don't think they can do that, sadly. As much as I would love it, that would be a very fun outcome to the offseason.
All right, guys, we're going to be back with Prez in just a sec to continue talking through some of his favorite prospects in this draft, maybe starting to get into some of the stretch fives. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our good friends over at Gametime. So you might be at home asking, what makes Gametime different than other ticketing apps? Well, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets and really tickets to just about everything. So what ultimately separates them? I'll tell you. Priority last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Guys, I'm lucky enough to live just 15 blocks from MSG. This was a dream for me throughout the playoffs. I could always look, and if the prices dropped enough, I was biting and saying, screw it, I'm going to walk down and go to a game at MSG. They also offer flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. But the ultimate separator to me is the game time guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a lower price ticket on a different site. So there was no world where using Gametime is the wrong choice. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets and NBA tickets in general with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I'm going to go a totally different direction here and go with a guy. I feel like this is maybe like I got to look at the answer key a little bit because I read and proofread all of your Strickland profiles. So I kind of feel like I have at least a little bit of a good idea of who you like, who you don't like.
Can I just throw out, Alex? I feel like I'm the team that didn't get the medicals right now, and you got all the medicals, and I'm just screwed here. But go ahead.
Yeah. The guys are not working out for you. They all worked out for me, though. Don't worry.
Apparently not.
I want to know about Tyler Smith. He intrigues me. He's definitely the type of guy that stands out to me as far as prospects that I sometimes fall for because I like sweet shooting tweeners. That's one of my favorite archetypes for whatever reason, even though they rarely work out. I was famously terribly wrong back in the Kevin Knox draft cycle. I was all in on the Knox train, because I was like, this dude can shoot. Like, he's like 6'9", like Sure, he can't play defense, but I don't care. He can learn. Just get him in the NBA. He's young. He'll figure it out. It's like an Avengers Endgame, and Scott comes back as a baby and they're like, he's a baby. And Hulk's like, he'll grow, he'll learn. That's me with so many prospects. But how you feel about Tyler Smith? Because, in reading your profile and then watching a little bit on him, it's clear the kid can shoot and he's got good size, but you noted in your profile of him on the Strickland, like the guy is not great on defense, and his finishing numbers for a guy of his size are freaking atrocious. Like nobody who's 6'9" should be shooting 40 something percent like at the rim. That's disgusting. That is a really disgusting number. So where do you fall on him as far as, I mean, I think he obviously falls into that category you mentioned earlier when we were talking about, like, if you want to draft a guy who's a clear project, like who, you're going to need to season a little bit, probably send to Westchester. He's probably the guy. But where do you stand on him as far as like long-term outlook and potential if the Knicks would draft him, and like where he might be able to fit, maybe not this year, but maybe in years down the line?
I'm a huge fan of Tyler Smith. I think his defense is his weak point, but I think his defense being bad has been like dramatically overstated by a lot of people. Like this draft is not full to the brim with lockup defenders, right? Like Reed Shepard is 6'3", 6'3", gets a lot of stocks, but like is still a 6'3" guard, a defender. Rob Dillingham is a terrible defender. Nikola Topic is a terrible defender. Half the top 10 are guys who look malnourished, and even if they're tall, they're like 170 pounds and they're going to get pushed around, right? Like Collier, terrible defender. The Flips and Devin Carters and Ryan Duns are the exception in this draft. And, if you watch the Ignite this year, then first of all, kudos to you, because that was a very poor brand of basketball, is probably the most generous way I could put it. They pretty much switched everything. They had hardly any structure other than just switching. And most of the time, very few players generally knew where they were supposed to be off ball. And Tyler, like, I thought actually acquitted himself pretty well. He showed clear defensive strengths, which is one thing that I've tried to do a little bit more of. One thing I've tried to do a little bit more of in this draft cycle is like, we can, like, yes, you can call some players good defenders and some players bad defenders, but some players are good at certain things at defense and bad at other things in defense, right? Like Mitchell Robinson is amazing at almost all types of defense, really bad at defending stretch fives, right? Like we've seen that time and time again. And you can do this with other things, right? Someone could be really good, like Dante DiVincenzo, pretty great going around screens. When you give him a simple assignment on ball, like make Tyrese Maxey go left, he can do that. But if he has to defend somebody who can go left, go right, do a lot of stuff, and is probably taller than him at the point of attack, he's going to get roasted. He's not the best point of attack defender, but he's great at getting steals off the ball, right? Like he's Emmanuel Quickly, right? Like amazing off ball defender, sometimes good on ball, undersized, right? So like defense is really nuanced. And for Tyler Smith, he's pretty light on his feet. Like he can stick with guys on the perimeter, and he's really good as a weak side rim protector, right? This guy is almost 7 feet and he got bounce and he's got long arms. So like he's actually giving you secondary rim protection at the 4, which is something the Knicks only have when they play OG Anunoby at the 4. We haven't really had that consistently in a long, long time. And it's really important for good defenses to have that, right? Like if you look at why guys like Giannis, guys like Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson, these guys are providing help by being huge guys, mucking up the floor. They're providing help by being rim deterrents. They can switch onto the perimeter for a second. And Tyler Smith is not to be mentioned with those guys in the same sentence on defense. But the point is, like, he has some things he can work with, and you just got to teach him the finer points of defense. And I think his athletic tools will get him there, get him to like above average on defense. I think there's a way to get to above average on defense, and I don't think it's like some outlier thing. Offense, It's a much easier sell, like you were saying, Alex, right? Like the guy is a sweet shooting lefty. He's got bounce. He's got perhaps too much skill for the Ignite. And by that, I mean, like, you ask why his rim percentages are so low. It's not actually because he's a bad rim finisher. It's because he finished bad at the rim because he was like, okay, I'm taking lefty off wrong foot floaters and I'm taking like bank floaters and just touch shots, and like Tibbs not gonna let him do all of that, right? It's gonna be like, yo, you getting the precious shot diet, right? Like you get layups, you get dunks. I might give you one floater a game if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, right? And like all of a sudden his finishing numbers would look great and people would be like, oh my God, he got so much better. No, he didn't. He just got smarter. So I think he's talented. I think he can score pretty much everywhere. He's a great mid-range shooter as well. So, I mean, he has all the offensive talent in the world. The other reason I'm really high on him, the last thing I'll say about Tyler Smith is like one kind of hole in his game right now is he's kind of old school in the sense that he doesn't really drive, right? It's either like pick and pop, get the ball versus a mismatch 15 feet away and shoot over them, or just do off ball stuff like come in for an alley-oop or get a putback or whatever. There's no driving. He's not using screens as a ball handler. And a big reason he doesn't do any of that is because he's kind of weak physically on offense. Like he'll try to get into guys driving and just nothing kind of happens. But I don't think he's got like a bad frame at all. I think he just needs to get stronger, right? And that's something that the Knicks have shown they're pretty good at, right? Like physical development for skinny guys. Look what happened to Mitch. Look what happened to Quickly. RJ, perhaps a little too much physical development, some would say. You know, if Smith was on the Knicks, I think down the line, his ceiling would be really high because he'd be stronger. And now, if you're talking about a 7-footer who can take one or two dribbles and hit a floater, or you know, go for up and unders, or just dunk on you, like that's serious player, especially if they can shoot threes. So I'm super high. He's like either in my top 10 or right outside it on any given day.
I mean, it sounds really appealing to me just because the Knicks just feels like they don't have a lot of guys who finished with a ton of force at the rim. And then OG came in and kind of gave you a taste of that. And it felt like, wow, whole new world. And it would be cool to double down on that. I had one more guy that is a pretty definitive trade up guy before like closing out with maybe one or two players that are definitively in their range, and then maybe one or two the second round guys. But Jacobe Walter was just reading up on him, like and tell me if this is an opinion you agree with, but just kind of read as like, all right, this is like a Tibbs type of player, born and bred, maybe probably would kind of have to go through the Deuce path of like not really playing for like a year or two and like G League for a year or two, but like down the road, like if they do make that consolidation trade, like could come in as someone who hasn't played a ton of NBA minutes and then and maybe be ready to fill a role. But is that an assessment that you agree with? And do you think he would make for a good fit on the Knicks?
I'm not a huge Jacobe Walter fan. I think he's definitely talented. And he's one of the few guys I mentioned I want to revisit before draft day a little bit. Just because his numbers are really underwhelming. And every time I watch them, he kind of underwhelmed me. He has great size and he's got real NBA skills, like shooting off the move and drawing fouls when he's like just causing chaos as a movement shooter. But he's not particularly, he doesn't really move me as a rim threat or finisher. And as a pull-up shooter, he looks really uncomfortable. And to me, that was kind of like the death knell for him as a prospect, because like the days of movement of a guy making a whole career as only a movement shooter, right? Like Kyle Korver or whatever, like those days are gone. Movement shots are really hard analytically, and they tend to only be worth it if you're like Dante DiVincenzo or prime FIBA Evan Fournier or something like that, right? Like if you have a whole team that's based on a lot of movement, then it can be worthwhile. And every shooter needs to be able to do what I call like baby movement threes, which is like, oh, I'm in the corner and then I sneak up over here to the wing and I'm like sort of trotting, but I'm not going too fast, but I am catching it on the move, right? But that's different than like when we think of Ray Allen or Rip Hamilton or Kyle Korver just coming screaming around like 3 picks and just firing it up in like 0.001 seconds, which is what Jacoby's good at. But off the dribble, he looks pretty far from being comfortable, and the stats kind of back that up. So, he's got tools on defense, but he's not a good defender right now either. So he's just too far away, and the upside, he's both too far away to help now and not high enough upside for me to really care a lot about him, which is kind of a grimy way of putting it, but it is what it is.
Appreciate the honesty. Maybe makes the positive reviews more convincing.
All right, we'll be right back in to finish up this episode with Prez, second part of 3, talking about some stretchy centers, 2 guys with very different paths to the NBA draft. So we'll talk about them in just a moment and get you familiar with a couple potential Isaiah Hartenstein replacements. Let's not talk about that. But first, let's talk about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. And with PrizePicks, you get to turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you are locked in. And if you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you end up losing lineups on Fridays. It sounds like a great way to end the week to me. A risk-free chance to win a bunch of money. That sounds really cool. And when the finals are over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is just getting started, with young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You go in up to 100 times cash watching them ball out. So if you want to check it out for yourself, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
But Alex, was there one more reach guy? Do you want to move on to guys sort of in that 24-25 range?
I don't know where maybe I need a little bit of clarity here, Prez, on whether this guy is a reach or if he is more in the Knicks range. He is, once again, another green room invite. So that means the NBA thinks that he will presumably get picked in the first round. Literally 25 out of 30 spots in theory will be filled in the first round, as long as all the green room invites get taken, which would include the Knicks if everything goes chalk and the 25 guys that were invited to the green room all get picked. But DaRon Holmes, this is the guy that I wasn't really on my radar until I read your profile on him, and I was like, what is this guy's deal? Like, he seems pretty good. Another Dayton product, we'll see if the Knicks dip into that well again. But a guy who, when I was reading your profile on him and then looking into him a little more after, I'm like, he's weird, dude. Like, he's like a center, but they tasked him with some ball handling and like running pick and rolls and stuff. Like it seems like he had a pretty wild year as far as the responsibilities he was given. And in a world where, if Isaiah Hartenstein leaves and follows the money, which is a very real possibility, I think it's much more likely that Isaiah Hartenstein might leave just because, he's at a historically shorter lifespan NBA position, and it might be a little harder for him to turn down like $30 million extra over the course of 4 years than, like OG Anunoby, who the Knicks can actually afford to just pay whatever he wants in theory. So in a world where if Isaiah Hartenstein leaves, then suddenly they're going to be kind of scrambling for like, oh, well, now we're back to relying on Mitchell Robinson full time again, which I'm sure they could be a great team with him there, but they've sort of grown accustomed to this, having 2 really good centers at their best as a team, having 2 guys that they can have flip in and out of the game and, not lose too much there. And I don't know for sure if Holmes is that guy, but I'm kind of just curious your thoughts on him as far as the Knicks fit, and also where you think he might end up in this draft. It seems like he's one of those guys that if the right team falls in love with him, maybe he gets picked like 13, but otherwise there's a very real chance he can make it to like 24.
Yeah, apparently he canceled like all of his workouts for the last month. So the rumors are that he has a promise from a team towards the back end of the first that he is okay with, rather than, saying I'm going to go higher, but to a team where maybe I have to fight for minutes more. A lot of people, I think y'all said it, posited Denver, right? The first big off the bench for them in the playoffs was DeAndre Jordan. So the bar for help is not the highest one in the world at this current moment. Or Peyton Watson arguably is like the other big, who is probably like the same age or younger than DaRon Holmes, right? He was like 18 when he came into the NBA, I think. So he's super skilled, and I had a tweet earlier today where I was like, hey everybody, like, who do you think is the player who will make you look the stupidest, who has the highest chance of making you look stupid or highest chance of making you look like a genius? And for the first one of who do I think has the highest chance of making me look stupid, I put DaRon Holmes, because his stats are legit bonkers. They're insane. And like, yeah, the track record for upperclassmen centers is not great, but like, those stats are patently insane. He does a lot of funky stuff, right? Like, he's a center who, like you said, Alex, they let him bring it up the court. They let him run pick and rolls. They let him attack mismatches. They let him hit mid-range jumpers, shoot threes. He passes the ball. He dunks on guys. He rebounds. He's kind of skinny, but he's pretty athletic, even if he's skinny and undersized. And, there are centers who have made that work, right? Like Jared Allen's like 6'10" in shoes, super long arms, and has been a shade under premier center pretty much for a long time now. So you can definitely do it. I'm worried about his defense, DaRon Holmes, as a center. I don't have a super confident projection of him as a plus defender. And just, I've fallen into this trap before with Şengün. I was like, yo, I don't think he can defend, so I don't care. That's the center's main job. I'm super Tibbs pilled. I'm like, does your center rebound and defend? If not, then cool. I don't care. Like, send them to White Plains or whatever. So for DaRon, I'm like, yo, he can do all that Mickey Mouse stuff. First of all, he's not even going to get to do all that stuff in the NBA because they're not going to let him bring up the ball or run pick and rolls, right? So, like, you're counting on him for the more basic stuff, which he's good at, but he's not great at, right? He's not a sniper from three. He's good for a 7-footer or under 7-footer, which is nothing to be ashamed at. But, like, if he's just good at this stuff on offense and not great, and his defense isn't good, then it's like, is this worth a first round pick? Especially where there's a zillion good centers in this league, right? So, like, it's really tough. So I'm a little lower on him, but if the Knicks pick him, I'm gonna be talking about his versatility, his skill with the ball, his ability to put it on the deck, attack mismatches, pass out. I will flip my tune so fast, delete all the footage, get Alex to scrub the posts on the website, all that stuff. Because he's definitely, like, despite my arguable hating, he's definitely got some talent. And some people even think because he's like a little undersized, he's not the most nimble, but he is long. So some people are like, maybe he can get some minutes as a big four, right? Like, kind of like we saw with Precious, but except for can actually shoot, right? Like, that's something. If I was a team that drafted him, I would certainly experiment with that, because even though playing defense at the 4 is different than playing it at the 5, like, being huge helps a lot. So, it would be prudent to test the waters on that in practice and maybe in games if you draft DaRon Holmes.
Does Kel'el Ware out of Indiana kind of fall into that same bucket to you, or is he a little different?
The same bucket? How you mean?
Like, are him and DaRon Holmes? Because I know the general descriptor of him is like stretch 5, like kind of like nominally like long enough, but like kind of iffy effort defensively. And like I think he's another one of those guys who's very skinny, like where he just doesn't really do the classic Tibbs center things you want, but brings some of that flash to the table.
Yeah, Ware is he's talented. Similarly, he can take 1 dribble, 2 dribbles, do a Euro step, dunk on people. He doesn't take a lot of threes, but he makes the ones he takes. His form isn't pretty, but it's not bad either. So, like, he's got a really high ceiling. To me, the difference is that even though Kel'el has a lot of lapses in defense in terms of awareness. He's not undersized. He's 7'1" with a 7'6" wingspan, or 7'4" wingspan, I think, which is the same as Mitchell Robinson, I want to say. So he's a legit big dude and he could jump. So it's just a matter of like ironing habits into him, and being big and athletic will take care of the rest, right? Like DaRon is he's almost got to be like Hartenstein on defense, where like Hartenstein has to do everything right. And not that Hartenstein's undersized height wise, right? He's 7 feet, but like his standing reach is okay. He's not jumping super duper high on defense. He just has amazing timing, and he just knows where to be. And like, he doesn't have a lot of margin for error, right? And we saw that in the playoffs with Hartenstein, where he had poor defensive performances both versus Philly and versus Indiana, because it's hard out here if you don't have a big room for error as a center, a big margin for error to like erase shots using length and athleticism. So Ware has that margin for error, which is why I think I'd definitely be cool if the Knicks picked him, even if it was just to kind of like be the Padawan for a couple of years until we trade Mitch or Ihart. We know he was already under the tutelage of Mike Woodson, so he was in good hands this year.
The East
I
is
was
big, man.
literally
East
just
is
about
still
to
big, man. East is still big, man.
I was literally just about to say that as the closing point on Ware, of like, he'll be interesting. I've been thinking about him a decent amount, like from a Knicks perspective, because he's one of those like fall from grace, like lottery talents, that like everybody thought was going to be the hotness out of high school, and then didn't really do as much his first year, transfers, goes to Indy, and then is under Mike Woodson. So it makes you think like, oh, if any team, sort of like the Coach Cal pipeline, where I was always like, oh, the Knicks have the inside track on Kentucky guys because they, Leon Rose is like best friends with Coach Cal. Like, they've got Mike Woodson, who was literally their assistant coach for a bit and probably is still pretty tight with people in the organization as a result. They could just call up, direct line to, and be like, hey, what's the deal on this kid?
All right, guys, I know it sucks. I know it's painful. We are moving on to a part 3. You're going to have to wait those long 24 hours, but we're going to reward you. We saved the best guys for last, or at least the most controversial guys for last. Zach Edey, Ryan Dunn, maybe two of the favorites to go to the New York Knicks. Praise makes a pretty compelling case for why Edey could be one of the best offensive hitters in the NBA pretty early on in his career, and why it's his defense that is ultimately going to shape his career. It's the opposite for Dunn. And then we get into some of Prez's favorites in this draft and a bunch of names really fast. It's a whole lot of fun. These are always some of my favorite episodes of the year. I hope the same is true for you. 2 parts in, 1 part to go. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Locked On Knicks.